The email that almost cost me my certification was one sentence long. If you want process, follow every step. That was what Diane wrote at 4:47 on a Thursday afternoon, after I asked her to confirm that she was ordering me to move out of my assigned training track in week 4 of a 6-week compliance certification. She thought she was ending the conversation. She was not. 6 days later, HR called me and said Diane had reported that I refused a mandatory training assignment. I asked the HR specialist to stay on the line for 10 seconds, opened my sent folder, and forwarded the same email chain I had been building all week. Then I said, I followed every step. There was a pause. Then HR asked a different question. Who told Diane she had authority to override the certification process? That was the first time anyone in that company asked the right question. My name is Nora Walsh. I was 32 years old, and at the time I worked as an implementation specialist for a medical software company in Phoenix. Our clients were hospitals, billing groups, outpatient clinics, and specialty practices. We did not sell fun software. We sold the kind of software people only notice when it breaks. Claims routing. Eligibility checks. Prior authorization notes. Audit trails. User permissions. Patient billing rules. The boring machinery underneath healthcare paperwork. That meant training mattered. If you were going to work directly with clients, you had to pass a 6-week internal certification before you could run an implementation without a senior lead on every call. The company treated it like a checkbox when they were recruiting people, but once you were inside, the rules were strict. 6 modules. 2 live simulations. 1 security test. 1 billing workflow exam. 1 instructor sign-off. No mid-track changes after week 3 unless both instructors, training operations, and compliance approved it. That last rule mattered. Most people did not read the training manual. I did. I had spent 5 years in operations before I moved into implementation. I liked systems. I liked knowing where the real authority sat. A manager could sound powerful in a meeting, but if the workflow required an instructor signature, then the signature was the power. My assigned certification instructor was a senior implementation lead named Daniel Ross. Daniel was dry, precise, and allergic to shortcuts. I liked him immediately. He did not care who talked the loudest. He cared whether your build notes matched the client requirements. By week 4, I had passed the first simulation, completed the security module, and built a mock claims workflow that Daniel marked as clean enough for client work. I was not the star of the cohort, but I was steady. I had every assignment uploaded on time. Then Diane got involved. The timing was not random. Our company had a client go-live scheduled for the end of the quarter, and implementation staffing was tight. Every certified person mattered. If I finished Ross track beyond schedule, I could be assigned to the Mercy Valley rollout as a junior implementation lead under Daniel. Mercy Valley was not a huge hospital system, but it was important to us. 3 outpatient clinics. 1 billing office. A new clearinghouse connection. A payer mix that made prior authorizations messy if the build was wrong. Daniel had already told me I would probably be added to that project if I passed. That was why I cared so much about the track. This was not about a class preference. Ross Track B had been built around the same kind of client I was about to support. The mock workflow, the claim edits, the security exceptions, even the final simulation were tied to that go-live. Moving me to Miller Track D in week 4 meant I would lose the evidence trail that connected my training record to the work I was supposed to do next. Diane did not care about any of that. She cared that her dashboard had 3 empty seats. I knew because she said it in a meeting before she ever emailed me. We need to balance the cohorts, she told the group. The VP does not want to see underfilled tracks. Daniel said, not after week 3. Diane smiled at him in that polite way people smile when they plan to ignore you later. We will be flexible, she said. Flexible is a dangerous word in a controlled process. It usually means someone wants the benefit of rules without the inconvenience of following them. Diane was not my manager. That was the first detail people kept forgetting. She was the training operations administrator. Her job was to schedule cohorts, track attendance, make sure instructors had rosters, and send reminders when someone missed a deadline. It was important work. It was not instructor authority. Diane had her own cohort that was short on people because 2 new hires had quit and 1 had failed the security module. Her completion numbers looked bad. That mattered because training operations sent a weekly report to the VP showing how many people each track moved toward certification. On Monday morning of week 4, Diane emailed me. Nora, effective today you are being moved from Ross Track B to Miller Track D. Please attend the 2 p.m. Miller session and stop submitting work to Daniel Ross. No explanation. No approval. No reference to the manual. Just move. I read it twice, then opened the certification manual. Section 4.3 was exactly where I remembered it. After the 3rd training week, a participant may not be transferred between certification tracks unless the current instructor, receiving instructor, training operations, and compliance training owner approve the transfer in writing. That was not complicated. So I replied. Hi Diane, thanks for the update. Since we are in week 4, can you please confirm that this transfer has written approval from Daniel Ross, the receiving instructor, training operations, and the compliance training owner under section 4.3? I copied Daniel because it involved his roster. Diane replied 8 minutes later. Nora, this is an administrative assignment, not a debate. Please report to Miller Track D. I took a breath. I did not call her. I did not complain in chat. I replied, understood. Please confirm in writing that you are directing me to stop submitting work to Daniel Ross and begin submitting work to Miller Track D without the approvals listed in section 4.3. That was when she sent the line. If you want process, follow every step. She copied HR. That was generous of her. People like Diane often think copying HR makes an email heavier. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it just gives your evidence a witness before you even need one. I saved the message as a PDF. Then I followed every step. First, I emailed Daniel. Daniel, Diane has directed me to transfer from Ross Track B to Miller Track D during week 4. Under section 4.3, do you approve releasing me from your track? I attached Diane's email. Daniel replied in 11 minutes. No. You have completed track-specific simulation work that does not map cleanly to Miller Track D. I do not approve transfer at this stage. That was step 1. Then I emailed the receiving instructor, a woman named Priya Miller. Priya, Diane has directed me to join Miller Track D during week 4. Under section 4.3, do you approve receiving me into your track? Priya replied that afternoon. I cannot accept a week 4 transfer without a remediation plan and compliance approval. Miller Track D is using a different client scenario and different billing rules. I do not approve transfer as currently requested. That was step 2. Then I emailed the compliance training owner. Her name was Adele Cho, and I had only met her once during orientation. She was not warm. She was useful. I wrote, Adele, Diane has directed me to change certification tracks during week 4. My current instructor and the receiving instructor have both declined approval under section 4.3. Please advise whether compliance approves the transfer. I attached everything. Diane replied before Adele did. Nora, this is becoming excessive. I expect you in Miller Track D at 2 p.m. today. I replied with one sentence. I am waiting for the required section 4.3 approvals you instructed me to obtain. At 2 p.m., I did not attend Miller Track D. I attended Daniel's session, because Daniel was still my assigned instructor in the training system. At 2:06, Diane sent a Teams message. Where are you? I did not answer in Teams. I replied by email. I am in Ross Track B because the transfer approvals have not been completed, and the training system still lists Ross Track B as my assigned track. At 2:11, Diane wrote back. Failure to follow administrative assignment may be reported as non-compliance. That was the moment I stopped worrying. Not because I enjoyed conflict. Because she had changed the word. At first, she called it scheduling. Then she called it administrative assignment. Now she called it non-compliance. When someone starts changing the label, it usually means the facts are not helping them. I saved that email too. The first consequence showed up the next morning. The certification platform would not let me access Miller Track D. It had a hard lock after week 3. When Diane tried to add me manually, the system generated an error. Transfer blocked. Current week exceeds migration window. Compliance override required. She forwarded the screenshot to IT and wrote, "Please override manually." The IT analyst replied, "Training system overrides require compliance owner approval. Please attach approval." There it was again. Approval. Diane had spent 2 days acting like process was a curtain she could pull over my head. Now every door she touched asked her for the same thing. Who approved this? She did not have an answer. By Wednesday, she changed tactics. She emailed HR and copied my manager, Grant. Nora has refused to attend her reassigned training cohort and is creating unnecessary delays by overcomplicating a simple administrative move. That email could have scared me if it had arrived alone. It did not arrive alone. It arrived after my approval requests, Daniel's refusal, Priya's refusal, the system lock, the IT response, and Diane's own instruction to follow every step. So I replied to the same thread. For clarity, I have not refused a completed transfer. I requested the approvals required by Section 4.3 after Diane instructed me to follow every step. Daniel Ross declined release. Priya Miller declined acceptance. The training platform blocked migration due to week 4 status. IT requested compliance approval for any override. I am available to attend any assigned track once the required approvals are completed. Then I attached the timeline. I called it the Training Transfer Timeline PDF. Not because anyone asked me to. Because people read timelines differently than arguments. Arguments sound emotional. Timelines sound expensive. The timeline had 2 columns. The left column was what Diane told me to do. The right column was what the certification process required before I could do it. Move to Miller Track D. Current instructor approval missing. Stop submitting work to Daniel Ross. Current instructor release denied. Attend Miller's week 4 session. Receiving instructor acceptance denied. Ask IT to override the training system. Compliance approval missing. Report Nora for non-compliance. Required approvals never completed. That was the part that made the document useful. It did not just defend me. It showed the company exactly where Diane's authority ended and the actual process began. I also included the client impact, because training arguments sound internal until someone remembers why the training exists. Ross Trackby was using a mock client based on a cardiology group. I had already built the billing map for that scenario. Miller Track D was using an orthopedic surgery group with different payer rules and a different authorization sequence. Moving me in week 4 did not mean moving a name from one roster to another. It meant taking an incomplete record from one regulated workflow and dropping it into another one that had already passed 2 checkpoints. That mattered because the certification was not about attendance. It was about traceability. Every trainee had to show which instructor reviewed which simulation, which security exception was corrected, and which billing errors were resolved before the final sign-off. If my record moved without approvals, the system would show a clean completion path that never actually happened. That was the kind of thing clients paid us to prevent. I knew that because my actual job was helping clients clean up exactly that kind of mess. So after I sent the timeline, I did one more thing. I exported my training record. Completed modules. Instructor comments. Simulation score. Security test result. Pending final workflow. I saved it as a PDF and emailed it to myself with the subject line, certification record before transfer dispute. That sounds excessive until someone tries to change a system record and ask you to prove what it looked like before. I had seen that happen to clients. I was not going to let it happen to me. Grant called me 5 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. He emailed instead. "Nora, can you jump on a quick call?" I replied, happy to discuss. Since this relates to training compliance, please include HR or send questions by email so the record stays complete. He sent no more questions. By Thursday morning, Adele from compliance finally answered. I do not approve transfer from Ross Track B to Miller Track D at this stage. The requested transfer does not meet Section 4.3 requirements. Nora should remain in Ross Track B unless a formal remediation plan is created and approved. That was the email that ended it. Diane did not reply for 2 hours. Then she wrote, "Understood." One word. No apology. No explanation. No, "Thanks for following process." Just "understood." I thought that would be the end. It was not. On Friday afternoon, HR called me about Diane's earlier non-compliance report. That was the call from the beginning. The one where I forwarded the full chain. The HR specialist, Megan, did not sound angry. She sounded tired in the way HR people sound when they realize a manager has handed them a problem wrapped in their own emails. She asked, "Did Diane tell you to follow every step?" I said, "Yes." She asked, "Did the required approvers decline or withhold approval?" I said, "Yes." "I can send the individual approvals and refusals again." She said, "Please do." Then she asked, "Did anyone tell you in writing that section 4.3 did not apply?" I said, "No." That was the cleanest answer in the whole mess. No. After that, the investigation moved away from me. I knew because people stopped asking what I had done and started asking who had told Diane she could do it. Danielle sent me a message later that day. "You are still on track. Upload the final simulation by Monday." I did. I passed. The final simulation was a mock client migration for a cardiology group with 3 provider locations, 2 billing entities, and a messy prior authorization workflow. I built the map, documented the exceptions, and passed with a 92. The certification record showed Ross Track B completed. Not Miller Track D. Not Diane's emergency roster repair. Ross Track B. The Mercy Valley project manager added me to the GoLive team the following Monday. That was another quiet consequence Diane had not calculated. If she had successfully moved me, I would have lost my clean training alignment and probably missed the assignment. Instead, my record showed exactly what the client team needed to see. Security module completed. Claims workflow simulation completed. Instructor sign-off from Daniel Ross. Final score recorded. When the project manager asked why there had been a transfer dispute note in the system, Daniel answered before I could. "Administrative error," he said. That was all. 2 words. Enough to make the issue small without making me small. During the first Mercy Valley prep call, I caught a payer mapping issue in the mock environment because it matched the same exception Daniel had made us practice in week 2. It was not dramatic. A modifier field was routing to the wrong edit queue. But if it had gone live that way, the client would have had a pile of rejected claims by the end of the first week. I flagged it, documented it, and fixed it with Daniel's review. Later, he messaged me privately. "This is why we do not move people randomly in week 4. I saved that message too. Not for a complaint. For myself. Sometimes the record is not just for defense. Sometimes it reminds you that you were not being difficult. You were protecting the work. The HR review did not end with a dramatic meeting. It ended the way most workplace consequences end when adults are trying not to make a mess in writing. Quietly. First, Diane stopped sending direct training assignments. All cohort changes started coming from a shared training operations mailbox. Then the training platform changed. A new transfer request button appeared inside the admin dashboard. When an administrator clicked it, the system asked for the current instructor first. If the instructor declined, the request could not move forward. The first time I saw that button, I stared at it for a full minute. Current instructor approval required. Receiving instructor approval required. Compliance owner approval required. Effective date pending. It was section 4.3 turned into software. That was the real consequence. Diane had treated the manual like something she could talk around. The company turned it into a gate she could not talk through. Megan from HR asked me to join one short follow-up call. This time, I agreed because she sent an agenda first and included Adele from compliance. The agenda had 3 items. Training transfer workflow. Certification record integrity. Administrative authority boundaries. Those are not exciting words, but I liked every one of them. During the call, Megan asked whether I believed Diane had retaliated against me after the transfer failed. I said no. Not because Diane had been kind. Because retaliation was not the clean issue. The clean issue was that she used a role meant to coordinate training to try to override a certification decision she did not own. Adele agreed. She said, the process has to be clear enough that no administrator can accidentally become the approver. Accidentally was generous. I did not correct her. Sometimes you let people use soft words if the hard policy still changes. At the end of the call, Megan asked if I wanted anything added to my employee file. I said yes. I wanted the non-compliance note removed. She said it had already been removed. I asked her to confirm that in writing. She did. That email mattered more to me than Diane's silence. It meant the paper trail did not just stop the transfer. It cleaned up the accusation she tried to attach to me. 2 weeks later, training operations updated the transfer workflow. The new process required the system to request instructor and compliance approvals before an administrator could even send a transfer notice. The email template changed too. It no longer said effective today. It said proposed transfer pending approval. That wording was mine. Not officially. But I knew. Diane stayed with the company, but she lost the ability to move people between cohorts manually. Her role became scheduling only. Actual certification changes went through compliance. The strange part was that she tried to act like the whole thing had been my fault for taking her literally. In the break room, she said, "You know, most people would have understood what I meant." I said, "I understood what you wrote." She stared at me for a second. Then she left. After that, I stopped hearing my name from her side of the office. No more urgent reassignment messages. No more effective today instructions. No more administrative assignments that somehow skipped every person with actual approval authority. The next quarter, a new hire asked in the training chat whether transfers were allowed after week 3. Before I could answer, the system posted an automatic message. Transfer requests after week 3 require current instructor, receiving instructor, and compliance owner approval before reassignment notice is issued. I read that line and smiled. Not a big smile. Just enough. The rule had always existed. Now the software said it before Diane could. That was the thing she never understood. I did not beat her by being difficult. I did not beat her by being clever. I beat her by treating the process like it mattered after she told me it did. She wanted process. I followed every step. That was one office where a training process did exactly what it was written to do. The next woman worked in a different company, under a different policy, but the mistake was the same. Someone wrote a rule without imagining what strict compliance would look like. Rachel Morgan worked in claims support for a regional insurance company. She supervised 12 people, handled escalations, and had the kind of inbox that never truly emptied. Her company became obsessed with phishing tests after one employee clicked a fake invoice and created a weekend of panic for IT. The first new policy was reasonable. Do not click suspicious links. Report strange emails. Check sender domains. Then the security director got ambitious. He announced a new 3-strike rule. Anyone who failed 3 phishing simulations in a year would be written up. A 4th failure could affect bonus eligibility. Managers were told to set an example. Rachel asked one question during the training. How do we define suspicious if the simulations are designed to look like real internal messages? The security director smiled like she had helped him make his point. When in doubt, report it. Rachel wrote that down. When in doubt, report it. The simulation started the next week. They were not obvious. They used fake benefit updates, fake CEO memos, fake DocuSign requests, fake payroll links, and fake urgent client folders. Some came from domains that were one letter off. Some used the CEO's name with an external sender warning buried under the preview line. Rachel did not fail a single one. She reported everything. Then she kept reporting. A message from the CEO asking managers to review a confidential staffing attachment went to security. A message from finance with a link to a bonus calculator went to security. A message from HR with a shortened survey link went to security. Security marked 2 of them as legitimate and told her to use judgment. Rachel replied with the training slide. When in doubt, report it. By the end of the month, Rachel's team had the lowest click rate in the company and the highest report rate by a ridiculous margin. Security praised them in the dashboard, right up until the dashboard became inconvenient. The problem started with a real email from the CEO. He sent managers a time-sensitive request to approve headcount numbers before a client renewal call. The message had 3 things the security training had told employees to avoid: a compressed link, an attachment, urgent language from an executive. Rachel reported it. Her team reported it. 4 other managers reported it after seeing Rachel's example. The message went into quarantine for review. The review queue was backed up because the security team had trained everyone to report everything that felt even slightly unusual. The CEO's email sat there for 4 hours. By the time it was released, the client call had already started, and the numbers had not been approved. The security director tried to blame the managers. Rachel did not argue. She forwarded the training slide, the 3-strike policy, and the when in doubt, reported quote from the meeting transcript. Then she sent the report log. Every quarantined email had a ticket number. Every ticket number had a timestamp. Every timestamp showed employees doing exactly what the policy told them to do. At the review meeting, the CEO asked why his message had been treated like a phishing attempt. Rachel said, because it was written like one. The room went quiet. The security director said the company needed employees to use common sense. Rachel said, common sense is not in the 3-strike policy. That sentence did not make him happy. It did make the policy change. The company removed the automatic write-up language. Security had to label simulations more carefully after the test closed. Executive emails with attachments moved to an approved internal portal. Shortened links were banned from official company messages. Rachel's team stopped being the problem. The policy had taught them not to trust anything. They learned quickly. So did the company. What made Rachel's story useful was that she never said the company should stop testing people. She said the test had to match the rule. During the review, the security director tried to separate the two. He said simulations were meant to create caution. Rachel said caution was exactly what her team showed. He said employees should know the difference between a real executive message and a fake one. Rachel opened the CEO email and the last phishing simulation side by side. Both used urgent language. Both came from an executive name. Both linked to a document outside the normal claims portal. Both asked managers to act before the end of the day. Then she opened the written policy. Report messages that request urgent action through unfamiliar links or attachments. She did not have to add much after that. The words had boxed him in. The CEO was not pleased, but not in the way the security director expected. He was not angry that Rachel reported the email. He was angry that his own security team had trained managers to treat real executive communications as suspicious and then kept sending real executive communications that looked suspicious. So our official process is indistinguishable from our attack simulation, he said. Nobody answered. Rachel told me later that was the moment she knew the policy would change. Not when the client call went badly. Not when the quarantine queue backed up. When the CEO said the quiet part in meeting language. Indistinguishable. The revised policy did 3 things. First, it removed automatic discipline for failed tests unless there was repeated negligence after coaching. Second, it created a verified executive communications channel inside the company portal. Third, it required security to review report volume before blaming employees. If a department suddenly reported 50% more mail, security had to ask whether the emails looked too much like the simulations. Rachel saved the new policy. Not because she expected to need it. Because people who write rules sometimes forget the old version the moment the new version protects them. A month later, the security director thanked managers for their partnership in improving reporting quality. Rachel read that line 3 times. Partnership. That was one word for it. Her team had not partnered with him. They had obeyed him until his policy reached the executive floor. That was the email version of the problem. The last story comes from another woman, a public IT office, and one access checklist that management treated like a suggestion until the logs started talking. Elena Ruiz was an IT access auditor for a small city government. Her job was not glamorous. She reviewed user accounts, checked permission groups, and made sure people who left city employment did not keep keys to systems they no longer had any reason to touch. She had one rule she repeated until everyone was tired of hearing it. Freeze access before the termination meeting. Not after lunch. Not when IT had time. Before. The reason was simple. If you tell someone they are being fired while their accounts still work, you are betting the city's data on their mood. Most departments understood that. Public Works did not. Their deputy director, Carl, hated what he called IT drama. He wanted terminations handled like adults. To him, freezing access first felt hostile. Elena explained that it was not personal. It was sequence. Carl said, "We are not treating people like criminals before we talk to them." Elena said, "Then put that in the termination checklist." He did. For one contractor. The contractor had access to maintenance schedules, permit attachments, inspection photos, and several shared database folders. Nothing classified. Nothing glamorous. But enough to create a real mess if copied or deleted. Elena sent Carl the standard checklist. Step 1, IT disables account. Step 2, supervisor holds termination meeting. Step 3, equipment collected. Step 4, access audit confirms no active sessions. Carl changed the order. Step 1, supervisor holds termination meeting. Step 2, equipment collected. Step 3, IT disables account when notified. He signed it. Elena saved it. The meeting happened at 9 a.m. IT was notified at 9:41. That 41-minute gap became the whole story. During that gap, the contractor logged into the shared system from a city laptop that had not yet been collected. He opened 3 folders, downloaded a batch of inspection photos, and attempted to export a maintenance database. The export failed because Elena had quietly pushed for download limits on that database months earlier. The alert went to her inbox at 9:23. Large export attempt blocked. She did not panic. She opened the session log, saved the user ID, IP address, timestamp, folder path, and failed export message. Then she checked the termination ticket. No account freeze. No device collection. No IT notification. Carl emailed at 9:41. Please disable access for contractor effective immediately. Elena replied, access disabled at 9:43. Please note account remained active for 43 minutes after termination meeting began. Blocked export attempt occurred at 9:23. Carl called her within 2 minutes. She did not answer. He emailed instead. Let's not overstate this. Nothing was actually exported. Elena replied, the database export was blocked by system control. Inspection photos were downloaded. Logs attached. That was the part Carl had not expected. He thought the issue was whether disaster happened. Elena made the issue whether he had ignored the control that prevented it. The city manager got involved because the words public records and unauthorized access make government offices move faster. The review was not dramatic. No one stormed in. No one shouted. They sat in a conference room with a checklist, a sign change, and a log. The city manager asked Carl why he changed the order. Carl said he wanted to preserve dignity. Elena said, freezing access is not an accusation. It is a control. Then she put the timeline on the screen. 9 o'clock termination meeting. 9:17 shared folder access. 9:23 blocked database export. 9:28 inspection photos downloaded. 9:41 IT notified. 9:43 access disabled. The room did not need a speech after that. The sequence was the speech. The city changed the termination process the next day. High-risk accounts were frozen before notification. Supervisors could request a dignity exception only if the city manager and IT director approved it in writing. Contractor laptops had to be collected before the meeting or remotely locked during it. Carl kept his job, but he lost the ability to edit IT access steps on department checklists. Elena kept the signed version in the audit folder. Not because she wanted revenge. Because next time someone said process was just paperwork, she had 43 minutes of logs proving otherwise. The review also changed one quiet thing Elena had been asking for since before the incident. Access closeout reports. Before Carl's checklist, terminations ended with an email that said access disabled. That was it. No session review. No device status. No list of shared folders. No confirmation that tokens had been revoked. Elena had always hated that. Disabled is not the same as clean. After the contractor incident, the city manager asked what would have happened if the export had succeeded. Elena answered with facts. The city would have needed to determine what was exported, whether the records were public, whether any protected information was included, whether the contractor retained copies, whether the city had to notify anyone, and whether the access had violated its own internal policy. That was a long sentence. It got longer when legal added their part. Retention rules. Public records obligations. Vendor contract language. Insurance notice. Potential breach review. Carl looked smaller with every item. Not ruined. Not destroyed. Just smaller in the way people look when their convenient exception becomes a list of consequences. Elena did not raise her voice once. She did not have to. The log did the hard work. The city added a closeout form the next week. It required IT to document the exact disable time, active session termination, device lock status, shared folder access, last login, failed export alerts, and backup status. Supervisors had to sign that they requested access removal before the meeting unless an approved exception existed. Carl signed the new policy in the same conference room where he had defended the old checklist. Elena noticed his signature immediately. She scanned the page and saved it. The next termination went differently. At 8:55, IT froze the account. At 9 o'clock, HR started the meeting. At 9:06, the laptop was collected. At 9:14, Elena completed the closeout report. No alert. No export. No 43-minute gap. That was what Carl had missed. The process was not there to punish people. It was there so nobody had to guess what happened in the worst few minutes of an employment relationship. Months later, during an audit, an outside reviewer complimented the city on its clean offboarding records. Carl said, "We tightened that up last year." Elena said nothing. She did not need credit. The report had timestamps. 3 different workplaces. 3 different rules. A training transfer. A phishing policy. A termination checklist. The pattern was the same every time. Someone with authority wrote a rule as if the rule only applied to people below them. Then a woman read it carefully. The process did not collapse because she broke it. It collapsed because she finally stopped holding it up. If the process only works when people ignore it, was it ever a process?